Temujin's ex was salty at Temujin. Mayor's son gets killed. Salty ex conjures up his name as having done it.
Correct. And she hadn't talked to Temujin for months. The fact that he has been refused treatment for over a year. His brain tumor he's not allowed chemo. He offers to pay for things himself. They will not let him.
Hey, it's Jordan. I am in Flint, Michigan, East Palestine, Ohio, Tumwa, Iowa. Please support the only independent outlet on the ground covering what the corporate media covers up. Hey, it's Jordan. Delighted to be joined by Savage Joy. You all know her from many things in independent media as well as activism. But happy to talk to you because you've been advocating and covering really, if I might say, fucked up case. And I've seen a lot of fucked up things in Michigan in my day, but this is something of clearly, it seems to be, wrongfully convicted individual, Temujin Kensu, who's been in prison, correct me if I'm wrong, since the 80s?
He's serving his 38th year. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, so he basically, as long as I've been alive, I'm 38, for allegedly killing a man in a parking lot, even though by all the evidence he was 400 miles away. And there has been just an avalanche of other attorneys, advocacy groups. The Innocence Project has picked this up, calling for both Governor Whitmer, Attorney General Dana Nessel, infamously sabotaged the Flint criminal investigation, to grant him clemency, to release him. They won't do it. Let me show also, you are working on a book on this, which people can pre-order now because you've been living and breathing this. The book, which will be coming out soon, is this month, our friend Temujin, serving life, changing lives. So let's start from the basics. How did you find out about this? Give people the kind of who, what, where, when, and why of what he is alleged of and how they convicted him, if by all accounts he was far, far away from this murder.
Right. So it's a very insane, twisted story. But I first heard about him when I read an article in 2020, almost 5 years ago. And I reached out to his wife, Paula, and I said, is there some way for me to interview him from the prison by phone or something? I got to talk to this guy. I don't understand. Wasn't convinced of his innocence at that point, but I thought at the very least he needed a new trial. So I interviewed him for a few hours on the phone from prison. Wasn't the best quality, and you have 1 minute remaining, like the whole time. He had to call back, all that stuff. But by the end of our conversation, I was like, if even half of what he says is true, there is no reason he should be behind bars right now. So I looked into it more and watched every video and podcast and everything I could find on him. And, it's unbelievable that this man is still behind bars. Essentially on November 5th, 1986, a young man, 20 years old, named Scott Macklem was shot once in the side in his community college parking lot. Temujin, although over 400 miles away with about a dozen witnesses, including a Kmart where he bought a battery because his car was completely broken down. It was a blizzard. All of these witnesses, 9 of whom testified at trial, they're all saying, he's over 400 miles away. First, I should back up. Scott Macklem is the son of the mayor at the time. He has been known to have, not Temujin, this is Scott, he had connections with drug dealers and stuff. Well, if you're the mayor's son and you get killed, They do not want any of that coming out. They need a patsy. And Temujin's, I call her an ex, but he was just someone, she's just someone he hung out with a few times. He broke it off with her. She was salty, and Scott Macklin was her boyfriend. So she threw Temujin under the bus. Police had no idea who he was. They never heard of him. It was because she brought up his name. They were like, well, it must be him. He was obviously
So
jealous.
let me get this straight. Mayor's son, who does some is involved with drugs. The mayor's son who was killed, he was dating Temujin's ex.
Correct.
Temujin's ex. Temujin's ex was salty at Temujin. Mayor's son gets killed. Salty ex conjures up his name as having done it.
Correct. And she hadn't talked to Temujin for months and months and months and months. But she was like, oh, she didn't believe it was him, but she threw him in there. And then became this conspiracy to.
And what does that mean, throw him in there? Because I can't just say, yeah, that Savage Joy, she lit the house on fire. Like, you need some, like, prints, eyewitnesses that you were there. How does somebody who's 400 miles away get pinned for murdering this guy?
Well, unfortunately, they didn't have any of that. They had her word. This is during the Satanic Panic. He liked martial arts. He had long hair. He had a leather jacket. He sung in a band, and he liked heavy metal. All of these things. They dubbed him the Ninja Killer. He's so scary. And all of a sudden, she's saying he has like darts in his shoes, and like he jumped 40 feet out of a tree. And, she's making this thing like very like fantastic. So he was their fall guy. It was easy to blame on him. The prosecution literally came up with a theory that he teleported. That was their first theory. And this is all, like, guys, I'm not kidding you. I have court documents. I'm not kidding you. When that fell through, they said he must have hired a private plane in a blizzard, in an airport that was closed, with no money, no job.
I was going to ask, is he a wealthy guy that could just charter a private plane?
No,
okay.
No, his pregnant girlfriend was on welfare, who he lived with. They had a $200 a month rent they were in arrears with. He had nothing. He had absolutely nothing. And apparently there was just some pilot sitting there waiting to, like, he didn't even want gas money or anything. He's just like, yeah, I'll take you there. He landed the plane in a cornfield. Somehow a car showed up for Temujin to get in the car to go to the community college. It is the most insane thing in the world.
Did the prosecution ever identify plane logs? Because you do need logs, even if it's a chartered plane. You can't just fly in the sky without any documentation. Did they ever, did they ever identify a motive? Did he know the victim? Was there a reason for him to?
Nope. Okay. Never a pilot, never a plane, never a flight log. He never met Scott Macklin, and they have no proof he ever met him. It's insane. They picked this guy, and they wanted him to be the fall guy. The interesting thing is, by saying he hired a plane or he teleported, they are inadvertently admitting he was over 400 miles away. Right. Then came trial. They had a pilot who had nothing to do with anything testify that it was possible he could have hired a pilot, and come to find out it was the prosecutor's personal pilot that testified.
Was that disclosed at the time?
No. Nope. Temujin's lawyer was a public defender, because he was poor, given to him. He was on probation for crack cocaine. He used it during the entire trial, and was drunk nonstop. The judge also had a criminal record of such things, and so did the prosecution. Temujin's lawyer had represented the prosecution for being fired because of mob and drug connections. The prosecutor somehow gets this case to try a murder trial, which he has never done, even though he had been fired from the police because of mob and drug connections. Temujin's lawyer never objected to any of these things. In the trial, the prosecution came up with this long cafeteria table of all of these, swords and, all of these like ninja things and porn and all of this stuff, and had it laid out. None of it was Temujin's, none of it. And the prosecution, when Temujin would talk, or the defense would talk, the prosecutor would hold up a knife and go, ow, oh my God, ow, oh my God, I can't believe this is, someone would have this. And Temujin's lawyer never objected to any of that. There was a guy named Rennie Gobain who said he witnessed Temujin leaving the parking lot at the college, even though he said only his eyes were visible, and the car was changed colors and license plate numbers all the time. And the people that Rennie was with were like, no, we never saw that. What are you talking about?
And wasn't there a witness who pinned it on him, who it came out was hypnotized before that?
Correct. That was Rennie. A college professor who had never hypnotized anyone hypnotized him to try and come up with the license plate. I believe it was 17 times he came up with ones that weren't actual like numbers in existence. And yet he was allowed to testify at trial saying he saw him. Temujin was
and he was hypnotized on this particular issue 17 times before he testified. Wow.
Yep. Which is inadmissible. You can't use hypnosis, obviously, but again, the judge was in on it, so he didn't say anything.
I just want to play this clip, and we'll get into how you got in there in the first place. But this is you interviewed Temujin, and he kind of lays out that Governor Whitmer and Attorney General Nessel are ignoring just an avalanche of exonerating information.
How can our governor ignore hundreds of law enforcement, 2 U.S. attorneys, multiple federal judges, 2 Michigan Supreme Court chief justices, experts from all around the country, every law school you can imagine, scholars like Barry Scheck? I mean, we can go on down the line. How can she ignore all these experts who've read the transcripts, read the reports, talked to witnesses, looked at all the interviews, looked at the forensic material, looked at the crime scene photos?
So that was Temujin, who's obviously now been in prison for almost 4 decades and continues to assert his innocence. Talk about your interview with him. And, originally when you first learned of this, you kept an open mind, but weren't convinced of his innocence. But interviewing him in person, what was your kind of takeaways?
Well, I mean, we've built up an incredibly strong friendship throughout the past 4.5 years. He's a wonderful person, which kind of fueled me to fight for him even more. And just talking to him all the time from prison and hearing, well, today this happened and today that happened, and just hearing injustice after injustice. So we became very close. I also became very close with his wife, Paula. And meeting him was very emotional, meeting him in person. It's something we both wanted to do for quite some time. And it's not often that journalists are allowed to go in there. In almost 40 years, nobody has ever been able to record an interview except me, because for people who don't know, I am 85% blind. And I had to go through hell and high water to do this, but when I do interviews, I record them and then I print out transcripts. That's how I do them, so that I can read it with my apps and so on. And at first, when I was asking, I didn't think of it, because I'm like, I'm going to put a lot of the transcript in my book. But then I was like, I'm going to have recordings of, in-person prison recordings with this man. And nobody else has ever done that. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to try this. I'm going to pray they don't ask me to sign something that I won't, play it anywhere or give it to anyone. They never said a word. They never said, don't share the recording, sign this paper, anything. And it's over 4 hours long. Wow. So it's insane that I somehow got away with it. But yeah, I mean, it's been amazing to just, be able to share clips and not have the staticky phone line there. But it was wonderful to just be able to give him a hug and, see him in person and just, grab his hand and talk to him face to face. And after, investing so much of myself in his case, it was amazing. It was something that I will always cherish.
And I also want to point out, obviously it's a much different case, but we know longtime political prisoner Leonard Peltier was finally released after 50 years. There was no evidence he killed 2 FBI agents, but part of the rush or the push to release him is he's older and has health problems. Temujin is not that age, but he has health problems. He has a brain tumor, chronic lung disease, congestive heart failure. So nothing is guaranteed for any of us, but he's got some major things going on. Can you kind of talk about, in addition to being imprisoned for, it seems, clearly the wrong person, he also has these serious health issues?
Yeah, Governor Gretchen Whitmer and Dana Nessel are well aware of his disabilities, his medical issues, and the fact that he has been refused treatment for over a year. His brain tumor he's not allowed chemo. He offers to pay for things himself. They will not let him, which is a violation to begin with. So he's not in great shape, and he's 61, which isn't old, but because of all his health problems, and he's surrounded by mold, he eats like absolute trash because that's all they give them. He's not in great shape, and they are doing this to him on purpose, because between, the governor, the AG, the lawyers, the judges, the cops, there are so many people involved with this, which actually makes him a political prisoner. And if he would be let out, the lawsuits would be astronomical. Dana Nessel actually opened this thing when she was running, calls the criminal, the CIU. And what
the Conviction Integrity Unit.
Right. And what she campaigned on, what that was supposed to do is, we're going to look into cases of people who have been in prison a long time in Michigan, and we're going to decide if maybe we can pardon them or what have you. Well, she looked into Temujin's case. She said no. And then she refused to give him the 73-page report, I believe it was, on why. He's requested FOIAs. He has sued. He has done everything imaginable to try and get that report. even though it involves him directly, she will not release it. And she has been told that she has immunity because of her position. So he still has no idea why she denied
So
it.
let me broaden this out. This is not to make it about me, but I want people to fully understand Dana Nessel, because the two
Oh
are
yeah.
connected. Dana Nessel, Attorney General, who has political aspirations much higher than being Attorney General of Michigan, she has gained a bad reputation. Although her and Whitmer talk about transparency, they don't seem to like releasing information to the public. And Attorney General Nessel, in the case of Flint, where those who watch Status Coup know she basically sabotaged the criminal investigation after the Supreme Court of Michigan threw out her case, thus ending the criminal investigation. They no longer had the excuse to deny my FOIAs, because I was putting in Freedom of Information requests for all sorts of documents pertaining to the Flint water crisis. So I put in a FOIA request for a very specific set of documents that would outline the financial fraud that caused the water crisis, that, based on my reporting, she helped bury that fraud. Long story short, her office initially told me they don't have the documents, which was a lie. I then publicly threatened to sue them, and suddenly they saw Jesus and got back to me saying, we'll look again. Never happens. And then voila, they found the documents, but told me they can't release them. I believe they're not releasing them based on my sources because these documents, A, implicate not just Republican politicians, but Democrat politicians in the Flint crime, but also might expose some Wall Street banks involvement in the Flint water crisis. I say all this so people know watching, there's the water is rotten in Michigan, and it's not just because of the contamination, it's the politicians. Nessel, from Flint to many other things, she claims transparency, but she won't release key things. And they put forth legal statutes that don't make a lot of sense on their face. And it sounds like she's been doing the same thing here. If you're going to run on a conviction integrity unit or what have you, and you've done a report, if you stand by your report and this man shouldn't be released, why can't you release it?
Yeah, I think it's because it's a bunch of bullshit. I mean, there's no reason he shouldn't be released. If it's transparent, it's going to say it's going to hurt our donors. It's going to, Michigan's going to be held accountable for, holding this man in prison for 2/3 of his life, even though he did nothing wrong. Governor Whitmer has had his clemency papers on her desk for over 6 years since she took office. Thousands of us send emails, make phone calls. She never responds to any of them, even constituents. She has never, her or Dana Nessel has never once said he is guilty, he is involved. Never, not one time. They know.
Have they ever said anything on the case?
Well, Gretchen, no, not at all. And Nessel, she came out with like a 2-paragraph pathetic thing on denying it, on denying Temujin. And she basically blamed it on technicalities. She never said it's because he's guilty or because I have proof. Because there is no proof. There were fingerprints at the scene that weren't his. And, there is only proof proving it was not him. So really, this is about not wanting to acknowledge the fact that this man has been wronged by pretty much everyone in Michigan. And quite frankly, and Temujin says this a lot himself, they just want him to die in there.
Can I circle back with you? Originally, the victim in this case who died was the son of a local mayor in Michigan. Is that local mayor still alive? And if, I don't know if he is or not, but was that local mayor some type of powerful figure or well-connected that local mayor would want Temujin to have remained in prison?
He is well connected and he's still alive. Yes, very well connected. And I think it was just we need to make someone guilty right now, so the papers stop asking questions, because we do not want, like, Scott worked at a clothing store, Macklem, the victim, and drug dealers had come in and threatened him to physical fights 2 times right before the killing. They did not even ask them. They didn't ask those guys. They knew who they were. They didn't talk to them. They knew this was definitely something shady having to do with drugs or some kind of connections like that. They didn't want it to come out.
And also, wasn't there a witness that testified who later recanted his testimony, saying that essentially the prosecutor promised him some things?
Yes, his name was Philip Joplin. They essentially, nobody in MDOC shares cells. And Temujin was waiting in a cell to go into court, and they sent these 2 prison inmates in his cell. And he hasn't even shared a cell even when he was coming into prison and holding. And he's like, okay, why are there 2 guys in here? And immediately Philip Joplin starts, hey man, I heard you're innocent. What do you say to that? Things like that. Then all of a sudden, a few days later, so a few days later, they call Philip Joplin to the stand. Temujin's like, I knew it. I don't know these guys. They're asking me this. And Philip Joplin said, yep, he swore to me. He did this. He was bragging, all this stuff. The other guy in the jail said, he never said that. So Philip Joplin lied. While he was testifying, the judge says, just so everybody knows, Philip Joplin was not given any favors for testifying. Well, anyone who watches, courts knows that that's the prosecutor that says that, not the judge. Well, he did get something. He was released from prison for that testimony. And the judge's signature is all over the release. So
you can't make this shit up. It's so beyond.
It's insane.
I mean, this is like a Netflix documentary. It should be. It's crazy. Bigger picture. Obviously, this is about Temujin, but who the hell knows how many other cases like this are going on around this country that, whatever the reason, whether it's corrupt attorney generals, corrupt prosecutors, the good old boys club, they don't want to admit fault. Has this made you look into, other similar cases and the broader corruption in our legal system?
It has. I haven't been able to do a deep dive just because I've been, focusing on this case and getting out my book this month. But no, I definitely have a list of people who have reached out to me, who have said, they're with the Innocence Project and things like that, to try and look into them and see what I can, I've looked through thousands of documents and stuff. It's not it's not easy having to do this kind of, I'm not an investigator, and I kind of had to be to do this book, and I kind of feel like I could pass the bar exam at this point, just having to do so much research and look through the evidence and stuff like that. So it really is a years long process to do that. But I absolutely I do have a list of people who have reached out, who all from Michigan, go figure, so that I will be looking into.
Yeah, there's a reason Michigan ranks towards the bottom in terms of government corruption and transparency. The bottom meaning one of the worst. How could people just learning about this get involved? I mean, at this point, it sounds too little, calling your local politicians or flooding Nesso and Whitmer's phone, but how could people get involved in advocating for Temujin?
At this point, I think, because they don't listen to us, I think at this point, the only real help would be if we can get somehow get Kim Kardashian, to wait, what's this? Or someone famous. I mean, we do have Muhammad Ali's daughter who goes to Kalia, who goes to visit Temujin, and we have some wonderful people. The lead advocate of the Supreme Court of India
Wow.
posts about it, Temujin. It's pretty incredible. But I think if some famous celebrity, comes out and says, okay, look into this. I mean, she's helped free people before. At this point, I don't know. At this point, it doesn't hurt to email and call, but I don't expect results from that, unfortunately. I think just sharing the story. I think, even if you're not a true crime type person, even buying my book, Temujin's very much everyone who buys the book is going to know my story. And that's very exciting to him. He can't even read the book beforehand, unfortunately, because, he's in prison. But his wife is editing, and I do have their blessing from both of them to do this book, which is very important to me. So yeah, I mean, it of course, buying my book this month would definitely show support. Tweeting about it, investigating it. You can go to the Innocence Project website. He has a section on that. Really, social media is probably even better. Not that I think this does anything, but it feels good. I go on Dana Nessel and Gretchen Whitmer's Twitter a lot and just post free Temujin in the comments, regardless what they're tweeting about. But things like that, it gets people talking at least. Who's Temujin? What do you mean?
Have you had any luck, if you have, reaching out to Congressman Rashida Tlaib or any of the people who might be receptive to this in Michigan?
Well, as disappointing as it is, Rashida Tlaib is one of the representatives who wrote a letter to Gretchen Whitmer in 2022 to demand his release. And so it was her, Andy Levin, who has passed, and Stephanie Chang. They all wrote this letter. Andy Levin did a press conference. All three of them stated specifically, he is innocent. This is an injustice. He needs to be released. Big, long thing. You can find it. You can Google it. I have reached out to Rashida multiple times. I know Rashida. I've done shows with her. I've met her in person multiple times. I've Zoom called with her. She absolutely will not respond to me when it comes to Temujin, which is all I'm going to say is look at these people's donations. That's all I'm going to say. It's heartbreaking because we all love her very much because of what she's doing for Palestine. But she doesn't get a pass from me. So hitting her up, it may work. If a lot of people hit her up and say, yo, why aren't you speaking out? At the very least, she can tweet. She can say, hey, everybody look into this case. Michael,
you think there's something specific with her as far as donors that would make her not want to push on this?
Yes. Unfortunately.
Gotcha. But she did, you're saying, a couple years ago, she did advocate for his release, correct? 2022,
yeah.
Okay.
Publicly. Governor Whitmer, of course, did not respond to their press release. Of course, I'm not certain why people are so scared of Whitmer, but I do know that she has told people that she's going to be running for president in 2028. So I don't understand why she wouldn't free him now and look like some kind of hero for freeing this innocent man, whereas worst case scenario, he dies in prison and she's a murderer. I'm not sure how that makes sense in her mind. But if she does run, I hope everyone, makes it very clear what, what she's doing or what she has done to this innocent man.
Yeah, she's also stood by and actually awarded a company literally gassing a poor black
Yep.
community in Kalamazoo with more tax breaks and the ability to expand. That's the story we've covered. So there's a lot of things Whitmer and Nessel are doing out there. They're beloved by MSNBC and a lot of wine moms, but in reality,
the residents know.
in reality,
know. We both know. The residents know.
Yeah. Thank you, Savage Joy. I encourage everyone. You said this, your book, Our Friend Temujin, will be out this month?
It is, and it's up for pre-order now.
Great. So we'll put the link in the description. Everybody, if you can get it, it's a lot of work. I can tell you from my experience in Flint, going through thousands of documents, it's not on top of your day job and all the other things in life. It's nights, it's weekends, it's all the time. So thank you for doing
when you're
this.
Blind.
Especially if you're blind. So extra kudos to you for staying on this, and I'm glad we could get this story out.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it so much, Jordan.
Absolutely.